at the closing table.
What do you mean flood at the closing table?
Closing was at 9, and at 9:30, 9:15, I left everybody. I'm the buyer, ran over to let the painter in for my buyer, and there was basically $180,000 worth of water damage.
Oh my God.
So I called Thomas and Brown and said, don't fund. And now we're in the process of rebuilding this house.
Wow.
Nutty.
That's why I always tell all my agents, make sure that you do a walkthrough, put your eyes on the property the day of closing.
Isn't it crazy? I mean,
yeah.
we walked it the night before, but.
No, yep. It's got to be the day of, just to make sure, for that very reason. Yep. All right. Well, it is 11 o'clock and we want to be mindful of your time as well as others. I know for a fact other people will be jumping on and they will just be late. Welcome. We're glad that you're here on this Monday morning. We are very pleased to have Liz Cohen, who is a rock star agent in our office, and she's going to be talking to us about negotiating amendment to dress concerns. What do you do? How do you do it? And what's most important? So Liz, go ahead and take it away. I'll be monitoring the chat. If you want to chat, please mute yourself unless you have questions, and then you're welcome to just chime on in, okay? Thanks so much. Go for it.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? So here's kind of my my quotient that I work with on amendment for repairs. The first thing I do is, and I'll jump back and forth if I'm the buyer or the seller, because the truth of the matter is it has to work for both sides, or it's honestly, it's a moot point. So whether you are representing the buyer or the seller, you have to make it a win-win, or everybody has to equally be vested and be on the same page, because you should never lose a deal over the amendment for repairs. I always say, unless it's a crack in a foundation that's bigger than 1/8 of an inch and you're on the side of a mountain, okay, or you have black mold on an interior wall and you don't know where it's coming from, anything can be negotiated through. You just have to know who to call and how much it's going to cost, type of thing. You have to have knowledge. So that's why I've always been such a big proponent of having your vendor base and your vendors. So let's say I'm representing the seller and we have our inspection. The first thing I always do is kind of reach out to the other side and say, hey, any deal breakers? I just kind of want to get a feel quickly if they go, oh my God, or, we can get through this. And even if they say we can get through it, sometimes you'll get an amendment that's like, you're going, I thought it was not a big deal, and they've asked for 1,000,001 things. So as a buyer or a seller's agent, I always say to my client, now, we're going to get a report that's, 90 pages, and it's going to look like we're buying, the pit, or we're selling the money pit. Okay, even if you're buying a new home and you have your pre-drywall and your other inspections as you go, you get a list, okay? So setting the stage with your client that you're going to have a list is very, very key, because it sets the level of expectation. When you go in for a listing and you start talking about the cost of selling their home, I used to back in the day say, repairs, like when I did their net to seller sheet, because there's a line there for miscellaneous or repairs, etc. I used to say $800. Now I don't. Now I'll put in $3 to $5 grand. Why? Because I'd rather under promise and over deliver. I'd rather set the stage that we could have a really rough inspection or things to pop up where you could have radon, etc. Same thing applies for the buyer, that there will be items that pop up, and it's not like we're looking to make money on our repair list, but we are looking to have the house ready to move into. So the first thing I do is we have the inspection. I call the other side, and they say, I'll send you the report. And I say, I don't want the report, because all I want is the amendment. I don't necessarily want to see everything on the report, because back in the day on our seller's disclosure, it asked you if you had had an inspection since it was listed, and you don't want to have to disclose other things. So there's a very fine line of all of a sudden when you have information, what you're disclosing. So let's say I'm the listing agent, all of a sudden I get an inspection report. I call the other agent and say, I'm not opening this. I just want the amendment. Thank you for sending it. Maybe I'll use it later for reference. And anybody can pop in anytime, guys, and chime in with questions or argue. That's just kind of how I do it. Now, if I'm the buyer's agent, I'll send them the report right away. And the truth is, I'm playing both sides of the game because I want to set the tone that, hey, this is the whole report, and if we only asked for A, B, C, and D, and E, we could have asked for all this other stuff. Okay, so the first thing I do is I print the summary, or the items in red, or however your inspector does it. There's always a key finding report. So I literally print that out.
Hey, Liz?
Yes?
Liz, it's kind of hard to hear you. You're really muffled.
I'm muffled? Oh,
that's much better.
How about now?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come closer. My face might be like all in your stuff, but so I will ask, I will print out the key findings report, and I will sit down on my computer with a blank Word document because I don't want to type things in amendments and lose them, and all of a sudden you didn't save something and you've done all this work. And I've done it before. We've all done it. Have you ever typed something and lost it? There's nothing worse than getting an amendment done and it doesn't save, or for whatever reason you lose it. I also make sure when I send an amendment for repairs to the other side, or I am receiving it, it's a little bit harder when I'm receiving it, that everything is listed on there and they are not quoting the inspection report. They're not referencing another document. I want it all in there because I don't want the document, the whole inspection report, to have to be sent to the lender. And the minute somebody starts referencing 8B and 11C, and it's not there explaining what that is, you are introducing another document. So Paige does something great, Paige Morgan. She actually sends something out that says, and I'll have to get the wording because I would like to send that out. It's something to the effect of, please make sure the inspection amendment does not reference the report with numbers. All information, is complete on the amendment. So basically, you're just trying to write it out in layman's terms. One of the first things I also do is say to the other side, again, whether I'm a buyer or a seller, would your client be interested in negotiating a dollar amount? So if I'm a listing agent, I'm going to want to fix the repairs like a seller. If I'm a buyer, I'm going to want to fix it like a buyer. So for example, let's say you have some deck work that needs to be redone. Obviously, like deck work can really, really add up. And codes have changed in Cobb County, et cetera. And you start getting into flashing and ledger boards, et cetera. I might be more comfortable giving the buyer a lump sum so he doesn't come back later and say, this doesn't look right, and why'd you put a bolt there, et cetera. I don't want people to come back the day before closing as they're doing their walk and have surprises. That's the biggest thing, is that you don't want surprises on walkthrough. So the first thing I say to the other side, would they consider dollar amount? Now, it'd be easiest, obviously, to put it in closing costs, because then the buyer has money to do the repairs, okay? But if they're already maxed out, or it's a cash deal, et cetera, that might not be realistic and doable. If you have a buyer moving from up north, there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be little odds and ends, handyman stuff, and the husband's going, and again, I hope I'm being political, one of the spouses is going to work and the other one doesn't know anyone. Like, a buyer might not want to deal with the repairs. The other agent might not want to deal with the repairs. So you have to get a feel from the other side, whether their eyes gloss over when you say, I can give you a dollar amount or not. The key is you never want to come up with that dollar amount for either side to make money. It's to cover the cost of repairs realistically. So when I print out the report, in my mind, I have categories. I have, and I'd write these down. I mean, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, handyman, other. Because when you're asking for repairs as a buyer's agent, you might write both buyer and seller agree, repair, replace, and you start getting into qualified HVAC, licensed HVAC, okay? Handymen, they can't be, licensed is one thing, qualified. So let's say the only item on my inspection amendment for electrical is 2 GFCIs in near water areas. Would I necessarily make a seller hire a licensed HVAC, licensed electrician for that? No, I might let him use a qualified handyman to do 2 GFCIs. Now, if the whole house ground fault is missing, if there's something going on with the breaker box, double taps, etc., then I don't want a handyman. I want a licensed electrician, okay? So your bigger ticket items are your HVAC, your electrical, and your plumber, okay? Your handyman could be just everything else, odds and ends. It might be, again, it might be deck, it might be loose railings, window rot, wood rot, etc. So you really, in your mind, you go through that inspection report, your key findings, and organize them by who are you going to call. Because if you present to the other side an amendment that doesn't look overwhelming, it may be overwhelming and it may be expensive, but it doesn't go on 3 pages because you have organized for them who's doing what. And when you can put things in together, it doesn't go on for page after page after page. Okay, I'm going to stop and breathe.
That's a really important point, Liz, because if you combine all the plumbing stuff into one, or all the electrical into one, then if it just is a couple of items, it doesn't look like a big deal. If you have every single thing listed in a big old long list, it freaks everybody out.
It freaks people out. And I've had them where I represent the seller, and they gave me one of those 4 pages nightmare, looked like, oh my seller would have lost their mind. So what I said was, I'm rewriting this. You're like, well, you can't do that. And I said, how about I rewrite it? I'll send it to you. You sign off on it, and then I'll present it to my seller, because I promise you, it was just the way you organize it. And as long as every item on that key finding, you don't miss anything. But if you're telling them, hey, for example, today I got a phone call that says the gas line doesn't have a cutoff when we bought the house. They've been in there 10 years. And I said to myself, ooh, plumbing or HVAC? I'm pretty sure it's plumbing. I sent them 2 plumbers, okay? Sometimes there's certain items where you start saying, okay, a gas line or something with the furnace, that it could be a plumber, it could be HVAC. As long as you have it in there with a licensed person, then it's really the dollar amount that you're talking about. So getting to know kind of, hey, a hot water heater installed is $1,200. Flexible exterior cording near a furnace in the in the furnace, because sometimes they have the variegated, it's like a plastic piping instead of copper. There's certain things you'll learn prices. And again, you don't want to say to somebody, something's going to be $700 and it's really $1,700, because afterwards, they don't call you to say thank you. You never get a phone call after closing when people are like, I love my house, I'm so happy. It's always something has popped up. So you're trying to eliminate any kind of problems. And it might be a situation where you say to your seller, I'll help you run your buyer, I'll help you run the subs after, but I get the feeling, for example, the sellers have moved, they're gone. The agent on the other side, the listing agent, not the brightest little petunia. Do you really want them running your contractors and your subs? So sometimes I'll say to the other side, my subcontract, at least I know they're getting right and it'll get done at a cost that's going to be advantageous, quite frankly, to everybody. You don't want them to blow through their budget, or else they don't have money for the other things that you want them to do. Any questions? Are we that quiet? We can't be done at 11:15, guys. Come on.
No. So to your point, then you're splitting it out. So are you making? You're making two different lists. You're making kind of a honey-do list, and you're giving your. Do you spend the time giving your buyer vendors for them to check out pricing on the honey-do lists, or are we focused only on the stuff that we're asking the seller to fix?
Pretty much, it depends on what percentage of your key findings you're asking for, right? Okay. If you're asking for half of their key findings, then yes, you have to kind of give them an idea that these other items we're not asking for are going to run you about this, and this is who I would call after. Okay. But if you're handling representing the buyer, you're handling most of the items. And so here's what I'll do. The inspection report will come in, and I'll tell my buyers, listen, you look at this stuff, read through, look at the key findings, and I'm going to pretend you're my sister or my brother, and I'm going to write an amendment that I would ask for, the things I would ask for, okay? Then I want us to compare our lists, okay? Right. Because certain things that I feel I should have them ask for, and there are certain things that they're important to them that I was like, really? Like that's honestly, that's a $50, my handyman can come out and fix that. I don't want to eat up paper with that. When I get an inspection amendment, in my mind, it first goes to, how much is this going to cost? Who am I going to call? And is this going to be a pain in my tushy? Mm-hmm. Because if it's going to be a pain in the tushy, sometimes it's not about the dollars and the time, it's the pain in the tushy factor, okay? So you have to find out what's important, again, for both sides. If you give, as a buyer's agent, a long list of items, you give the seller the ability to say, okay, I'll fix that door jamb that's wrong, and I'll fix that window sash that won't stay up. But you know what? That 14, 15, 17-year-old hot water heater, I'm not going to talk about that. So you have to be really careful. You want the biggest bang for the buck on what you're asking the seller to do. Mm-hmm. And the same thing on the other side. I'll say, if I get an inspection amendment in and there's a bunch of stuff, I'll say, is there anything that's really a hot button? Because there's certain things that I go, that's a big pain in the rear end. We're going to try to get rid of that one first. But look, we're doing the other 9, but we've gotten rid of these 2 things. But the 2 things were really important to the buyer, and they were expensive. Well, you shouldn't have put 9 other items on there because it looks really good, because look at everything I am doing. So right. It's a little bit of a game and a time management on both sides. But again, both sides have to agree. I represented a buyer once. My buyer said, we don't want to do the repairs. We want it done. The seller was out of the house. The seller's agent was like, I don't want to deal with this. I said, and it was years ago. And he said, here, call my seller. Because I said, I have vendors. I'll run your vendors. I said to the seller, I think you'll get all this done for $900. Anything over $1,200, I'll pay out of my commission. How about them apples? Okay, I was so confident, and it wasn't a big list. It was like 4 things. I could get my 4 guys out there. So we came in at like $800. Well, hell, we should have took the cash. But again, they didn't want the cash. They wanted the work done. So be aware on the other side of working together. I did a deal with a guy from down in Buckhead. He was amazing, and it was so much repairs. We had to pull floors, and we were so vested together as a team working with subs together that we got it worked out. You have to not draw a line in the sand, and you have to think outside the box. And that's why anytime I'm always walking with people or learning about things, they'll say, yeah, I just had all this stone regrouted. Really? Who did it? How'd you find them? Did you like them? Because 1 week later, you can walk in somewhere and all of a sudden you're getting a listing and there's a stone crumbling and you're like, I need a masonry guy that's not going to charge me, or I need a guy that can take that garage that's sloping in the front with the brick and that can hoist it up a little bit, that's licensed, that knows what he's doing, you have to have the list of names. That's why your vendors and working through the office is so important for us all to use our resources, because that's how we are keeping our numbers fair and realistic and reasonable for both sides.
Right. So what I'm hearing is
section.
This is something that you're working together. That this is not your negotiations is a working together, not a fighting against each other, is what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of can't be like that. You have to. Now, if somebody comes in and they knew your HVAC was, you know, original, 25 years, your furnace, and they could see that when they drove up, their car was doing this on the nasty driveway, don't come back after inspection and ask for a driveway for 10K. Like,
Exactly.
you saw that driving in.
Right.
So there's certain kind of conversations sometimes, like as a listing agent, when they wait till on a 10 or 14 day due diligence and they wait till the day before the deadline to have inspection, these are kind of red flags. I mean, unless you're in the middle of a typical crazy busy selling season and all the inspectors are out 7 to 9 days, I get some of those issues. But in general, it's not a time to renegotiate.
No.
You're not coming in for 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. Like, this wasn't the deal. Sometimes people will come and say, oh yeah, they'll give you nothing and want 15 grand off the price. No.
Well, and I ask for, so you're asking for this amount of money. I need a list of all of the things that you intended for us to fix for that amount of money, because you're right. You just don't arbitrarily pick a number out of the air that's what you want off the price. What about, let's talk about for a minute.
Throwing dollars.
Right. What about, let's talk about protocol and best practices. As a buyer's agent, if you've got a 10-day due diligence, how much time do you give the seller's agent and the seller to review on average? How quickly?
I mean, when we find the house and we start writing the offer, and if you can tell right away, guys, is a new listing? Is it been on the market? Okay. Do I have a shot of getting this this contract accepted? I tell them immediately, you know, when we're starting to counter back for, here's my list of inspectors, call them ASAP. We want them tomorrow. We want them the next day. That's before you're even binding. You start giving them your list of preferred inspectors, saying, hurry. You can always cancel, and I'm not one, because I understand, you know, I don't want to call an inspector the night before and say it's off, but you can get a feel if they're out 2 days, 5 days, you know. So how much time do I give them? As much as humanly possible. There's no reason to drag your feet. You get an inspection and you wait a long time, 2, 3, 4 days to give them the amendment on the other side, you do nothing but give everybody acid indigestion on the other side. The sellers get angrier and angrier and angrier. The sooner you can get it over there, the better. That's why sometimes I will, again, they want something, I'll send the inspection report right away. And quite frankly, sometimes they need to see it. So sometimes the other agent will just forward it on. Because if it came up on our inspection and we walk away, it'll come up on the next one. So they may show the inspection report to the seller, setting the bar, saying like, they could ask for all this, they're only going to ask for this. Work as fast as you can. It's not work, and keep the lines of communication open with the other side. Hey, we just got the report. The wife did this, the husband's this, I'm working on this, I'm getting a couple prices. Always give them updates, a lot of updates, because there may be items that you don't know how much does that run. Let's say you get the radon back and there's a high radon reading. You have to know that number is 2,700 to 3,200 and who to call, and you have to know those numbers.
Exactly. And give them time to be able to get their own quotes. I mean, that's the thing, is you can't hand an amendment to dress concerns the day before or the day of, expecting them to just sign off on it. They're going to want to think on it, sleep on it, do their own reviews before they they agree to it. So you've got to give them some time. And I've had them where they've done a really good job up front, but then they wait to get it to me until the nth hour. And that just drives me insane. Why? Why did you wait?
It really
irritated.
It really upsets the other side. It was interesting because Al Maxwell said that he will send the amendment for repair, so he's representing the buyer, as soon as he gets it, but that night, the nighttime versus like first thing in the morning. And it's very interesting because how people process and spin and mentally twirl on things is different for everybody. Like if you have a worrier, a buyer or seller or worrier, and you find out some information at 8, 9 o'clock at night, you might want to give them a nice night of sleep and not bother them until the first thing in the morning. You got to get to know your client a little bit too, but there's something to be said. I really like that from Al. It was a couple of years ago. He says, I send the amendment at night because everyone gets mad. I'm not doing this and I'm mad and they can suck an egg and blah, blah, blah. But they sleep on it and all of a sudden they're like, we really don't want to lose the deal. It might be, you know, we might be able to get it for $1,200 difference. Do we really want to start over? We're going to have to start with another inspection too. So there's something to be said about not sitting on the information and getting it to the other side as quick as humanly possible.
Right.
And getting the quotes is important. So here's another thing. When you start to build your bench, you have the ability to take that amendment for repairs, scan that one page or take a picture and take a picture of the 2 pages that deal with my HVAC guy, so I can send it right to the HVAC guy and say, I need a rough estimate. I'm not going to make him come out, okay? Pretend I'm the seller. Why would I make him come out when I know the buyer wants money? I'm not going to drag my subs around and ask them for quotes and get them to come out and do things like that if they're not going to get a job. Right. Because that is, in this business, you have to think of everybody as a doctor, and they're in a chair with a patient. And so every time I have a plumber come out or an HVAC or a deck guy or somebody come out and give me a quote on painting, etc., there's got to be skin in the game that they could really get this job, or else you're going to lose them as a trusted vendor very quickly.
Good point.
You'll get to, you get to know your prices as you go, but if you don't know a price, send it out to the office. How much does it cost to repoly a house, repipe a house? Are they doing sheetrock repair where they're mudding and really sanding where it's ready to paint? Or they say, I'm doing sheetrock repair. And it's really a painter has to come in and do another mud job and another sanding job, and it's a different product. So you have to learn the verbiage, and that whole thing about our office and Keller Williams is that there's so many places to ask and talk and learn about this stuff that you don't have to know it all.
Right. In fact, in team meeting on August 11th, we've got a contractor builder who's going to be on talking about tips on how to prepare this thing and approximate prices of things. So it gives you an idea of what it's going to cost if you're making that recommendation. So we're always giving you options like that, which is great. So let's talk a minute about if a house is listed as sold as is.
Ooh, I'm
the buyer. Can they ask for any repairs?
They can.
Of course they can.
Here's what I always say about a house listed as is. Let's say you have a seller that said, I'm not doing anything. I'll price it for this, but I'm not doing that. I never list it as is because as is, as an unwritten, you're buying the money pit. Okay? There's something wrong with it and we're selling it as is. Okay? So I never say as is. Now, what I will say is we are priced so aggressively that I can probably tell you the seller's not going to fix much, if anything. I mean, like, seriously. That's a conversation as somebody's seeing it. They come back a second time. They get ready to say how negotiable is the seller. That's when you have that conversation. As a listing agent, as a buyer's agent, when you see as is, it usually means that they A, don't want to deal with it, or B, don't have the money to deal with it, okay? With any repairs on the seller side.
Or it could
there's
mean
nothing that means that you can ask,
yeah,
or it's bank owned, or what.
I was going to say, or it could be a flipper who doesn't have a disclosure, so it's sold as is. I've gotten new roofs on as-is houses, so I know you can ask.
As is versus when somebody says something's as is, that's different in my mind, and I could be wrong, than saying it doesn't have a seller's disclosure. As is to me was they're not fixing anything, but you can always ask. You can always, let me tell you, you can always raise a price and get more closing costs if you need the money to fix something. Let's say you have a buyer that really, they're scraping their money together to put down payment down, and all of a sudden you find out you have a dead hot water heater and the seller says, I'm not fixing it. There's always a way to do an amendment to the agreement where you can raise something again if you haven't already gone up to the highest point they can spend in closing, you know, in seller contributions to buyers' closing costs, etc. There's always a way, but as is such a line in the sand that that's not necessarily what it is.
It's not. So just when you see that, don't be pushed away. They still have the right to ask. Everything is negotiable, right? Okay, so we got a couple of comments or questions from Mary Caffrey. Thank you, Mary. It says, so how does the lender get the ATAC? And what if the ATAC ends up not being the last amendment? So it's amendment 3 of 5, and you can avoid, can you avoid giving it to them since there may be a missing amendment? I'm confused, Mary. You may want to chime in if you can. Also, if the lender gets the ATAC, these repairs have to be checked by the lender. That can be a nightmare. Can you talk a little bit about that, Liz?
I've gotten in trouble over the years for that one. Amendment to address concerns has to be given to the lender. It has to go in the order. And the problem is it's usually crossed through, etc. All lenders are different. So that's why you start out saying, first of all, the right rear window of home, you know, needs wood rot repair, front, you know, not saying 8-2B, okay? Because that's when a lender for sure will say, what is this? It's an incomplete amendment. But you have to turn it in. I used to do A, okay? ATAC was amendment A. And then we ended up either doing cash sometimes and it never got to the lender. Sherry's been much more, you have to get that amendment to address concerns to the lender. Do they want to go back and check work? Usually no. They usually don't check the work. Sometimes they'll ask for the receipts.
Unless it's an FHA and it was the appraisal request for repairs.
Correct.
I had them ask for pictures plus the receipts, and they were possibly going to have to go back to the house to put eyeballs on it.
Oh, yeah.
And getting the appraiser back from the lender, that could be a 3-day, 4-day thing. So if you say you need a new roof on the house 5 days before closing, it's too tight if they want to come back and look at the roof.
Yeah, but here's the $6 million question. Who would be asked, you know, you're going to have more time than a new roof in 5 days, let's say, okay? For sure. I mean,
no, it means that they might have 30 days to do it, but it has to be done 5 days before closing or 7 days before closing.
Truth be told, if the lender on the FHA, and truth be told, that I'm seeing less and less and less FHA. Now, I had one recently where there was an old leak. The inspector said it was fine, it was dry, and yet the appraiser asked for a letter from a roofing company. So there's never a hardcore line, you know, there's never a hard line. It always can change, but it's a toughie with time frames, etc. I'm more worried about it being done right, etc. As
true.
a buyer, right? As a buyer, I'm worried about being done right. If it's not going to close on time and it's holding up buyers and sellers and moving trucks and closing, then you start to go, that's your lender asking for a recheck. You know, that's my lender trying to get out there. I haven't really been caught in that situation. I had it where
had it where I thought I did something really smart, where it was that the seller, who was very difficult, could get the roof replaced under insurance, and if it was denied, then they got closing costs. What I didn't think about was the fact that they were very slow on getting to that decision point and having the roof denied. And so I was like, so it got to be where I think we were within 5 days of closing, and I didn't have for sure which path we were taking. And so I had to tell her that if we didn't get the paperwork we needed to close by noon, I was going to call our broker, which I asked Jim before I made that threat. But, you know, at the end of the day, anything but an exchange of money is so bloody messy.
In that kind of scenario, absolutely. So when I bought a house, they had to have an $18,000 crawl space encapsulation done. They didn't have the money before closing, but they were able to show me that they had paid Engineered Solutions, who I wanted, right at closing, boom, paid. Had nothing to do with me, but it was on the house. So as long as lenders are on board and things are, you know, you're working as the team, but if you had that to do that over again, Mary, you would have just probably done the same thing, but put tighter like timelines on them. Maybe?
I would have included in there that the decision whether the roof was going to be denied or we were going to go the closing cost route had to be decided by such and such a date. That was where I went wrong.
If you've got if you've got a homeowner's insurance that you have to get involved in, I'd almost rather extend due diligence to get the approval during that period of time than to have to add it in later on. I think it's less messy, don't you think?
When you start talking about timelines, remember, nobody wants to extend any kind of timelines ever, but rather than starting over, wouldn't I rather give you a day or 2 or 5 even? Like you start to say, again, nobody wants earnest money. Everyone's like, oh, do I get their earnest money? You don't want their earnest money. You want to sell their house. You want to sell your house. Like people go, who cares about the earnest money? We want to have a closing. So you almost have to keep everyone on that. And it goes back to communication with the other side. And if somebody's a jerk, you don't know. For all you know, their mom is dying of cancer. Like you don't know what's going on in another agent's life out there. So grace, 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 give them grace because you don't know what's going on. And it's so easy to get chippy and me, you know, like it's tough. And especially 2020's not been easy for people. Hello. So just give grace and have patience and ask questions. Say, am I losing my mind? But it feels like, you know, if you're just honest with the other side, I kind of feel like I'm getting hammered. Help me. Mm-hmm. There's something to be said for that. What else?
So let's talk a little bit. We've kind of scooted around roofs, but let's talk a little bit about roofs because most of the appliances can be at least covered by a home warranty, right? And if you've done a good job and asked for a home warranty up front, then if it's an older unit, that's really not as big a deal as long as it's functioning correctly, right? But roofs aren't included. So most people freak out when you say, yeah, it needs a new roof. Well, it can be taken care of, especially since we have so much damage around here. Talk a little bit about what that might look like.
Here's what people will say, like, you know, are there any active leaks? Okay, because a roof can be old, but if it's not showing signs of failure and there's not an active leak in the attic or wherever, people get kind of, you know, well, I could get another how many years out of it? Just like a hot water heater. I mean, they're supposed to be, you know, 9, 10, 11 years old. You get them 13, 15 years. They're like, there's nothing wrong with it. So with a roof, it's interesting because I don't have the statistics, but it'd be really interesting. Out of 10 roofs, how many people get a free roof? Storm comes through, call up the insurance company, call up a decent roofer like Ryan from Roof It Forward, let's say, and say, I want you to meet my adjuster out there, okay? So I always tell people a roof is expensive, but it doesn't mess with someone's quiet enjoyment. It's different than they have to have their flooring done, okay? Or they had a leak, and now they had a bad leak and they have to have all their floors redone. You can get into a home, move into a home, and get a roof easier than you can do a master bathroom. It doesn't mess with your quiet enjoyment. So be aware that when you're talking roofs, it's expensive, painfully expensive, money-wise, but it doesn't mess with the buyer or seller's quiet enjoyment. It's something that can happen when the life is normal. But cost-wise, etc., it can get up there. It depends on the size of the home, the slope of the home, all that. Do they have an old roof that has 2 and 3 layers that they have to remove? That's going to be more cost. It's going to cost more to get rid of the old roof. So there's definitely factors you can look at. Same thing with a firm.
Yeah. So I know for me, like with a roof, if it's really, really bad, and I get pushback, I'm representing the buyer and I get pushback from the seller, it's like, well, we're not even going to be able to get homeowners insurance on this property because the roof is bad. And that brings it to a different level. It's like, well, we know it's old, but that's your problem. Well, no, it's not, because at this point, we can't get homeowners insurance. So you have to kind of stick your ground on some of these things. Or this is a safety issue, whether you fix it for us or you fix it for somebody else, it has to be taken care of, right? Radon is another one.
Right. So, and a lot of times people say, oh no, my HVAC, it's new. Well, no, they have new condensers. The furnace is original. And there is signs that there's a crack because the flame is jumping up and down. And so it is a little bit of a game of, you're going to have to disclose it to the next buyer too, period. So let's work as a team and figure out how to get it fixed. If a seller feels like we're not trying to gouge them, we're just trying to take care of somebody moving in, and that we're willing to, just like we're willing to, when you're willing to put a little skin in the game too. So I always say on listing appointments, they'll say, well, will you work with us on your, commission? And I'm like, no, I keep my money, because when it comes down to the very end and we're going back and forth and we're fighting over this inspection amendment, not fighting, but we're going back and forth, and they take one item off, and it was my licensed electrician. And I know this is probably going to run me about $400. Why? Because I sent it to him. Done. Happy housewarming. My electrician will be there after closing. That's on me. Let's go. We're done. So knowing, again, how much things cost in your subs, you can use that to close a deal sometimes too.
Yeah, that's
and
so
that's
true.
whether you're buying or selling. Because sometimes they're going, I'm done. I'm not fixing this. I'm over it. I don't care about this one other item. Good. I got it. You're like this. They're like, no, you're not. You're like, yeah, you did. Okay.
And that's right. And that's so true with buyers as well. They look at an inspection report and they freak out over the small things like GFCI because it's a safety issue, but they don't realize that it's so inexpensive. That's a no-brainer. I mean, some of the things we can take off and we can take care of for them, and then they don't have it's less nitpicky, right? Absolutely.
That's the whole thing, is keep it as clean as possible. Keep it organized. So literally, you've got seller and buyer, license, qualified. Make sure it says license or qualified. Okay. Make sure it says repair or replace. Okay. Because sometimes if it's you just put in the repair and it really wasn't repairable and they just put so much Bondo and caulk on there, it didn't work. If it should have been replaced, it should have been replaced. So those are key words too. Also make sure that you have that stip in there that, will it be completed how many days prior to closing? For receipts and pictures, thank you, is a great idea, pictures. And that you and then you mentioned that we will be coming for final walkthrough. So there's no surprise. What do you mean they're coming for final walkthrough? cabinets, they're right.
So how do you prep your listing up front for amendment to address concerns? Do you say anything about this period of time during due diligence and what to expect?
Absolutely. So the minute we go under contract, I have a little verbiage that, you know, hey, we're under contract. You know, it might not go in the system for another day or two. Your showings will slow down. And then it explains, hey, you're going to have this inspection. They're going to ask for items. Now remember, we've already talked to them on the net to seller sheet at the initial listing presentation. And they all say the same thing. Oh, I've done so much great stuff here. Probably a lot of stuff won't come up on inspection. You know, you let them know with that line item saying you could end up with $3,000 to $5,000, $2,000 to $4,000. What number? You're going to tell with a home how old the roof is, how old the HVAC is. You're going to give them a number so they're not shocked when they get the inspection amendment. You're setting the stage ahead of time, just like for the buyers, setting the stage ahead of time. But I do have it written down where, and I can send this to y'all, it's just a very conversational item that says, hey, we're going to ask them if they want repairs. We're going to ask them if they like money instead. We want to fix it like this. They're going to want to fix it like that. Just set the stage that, yes, your showings will slow down. As a buyer, you know, you're going to have inspection. You're going to see a bunch of stuff. So it's a great time to start communicating with each side to set the stage. And you set it up worse. You set it up worst case scenario. You don't paint it, we'll be fine. You paint it up like you're going to have some stuff.
In fact, I even say it in the listing presentation. It's like, you can expect, when we're talking about the net to seller, I'll even say, expect anywhere from, usually it's around $1,000 to $2,000. Of course, it depends on the square footage of the house, but at least $1,000 to $2,000 in expected or requested repairs, always.
Hey,
And
you
then,
guys,
what if there's radon? Radon's
Right.
24, $3,000. So like, so I used to say $800. Now I say, listen, a good inspection's $3,000 to $5,000.
Right. Teresa, you wanted to ask a question.
yes, do you put a seller warranty on the house at the time of the listing and help prepare your sellers that these repairs will be potentially done at a very low cost to you, so you won't have to worry about it?
Yes,
I-
I do. I don't know about you,
like-
Liz.
I don't play around enough. My bad with pre-listing home warranties.
When that first started, at least when I first became aware of it, it was just after I had a seller on a $115,000 house have to spend $1,200 on a sewer line repair under the house. It was in Smyrna. It was an old house in Smyrna with a crawl space, and they had a leak. It was under the house. It was a drain line to the sewer. But no, I didn't. It would have been covered if I had known to put a seller warranty on it.
So for those of
I
you
felt
that
bad
don't know
about
what
that,
we're talking
but I
about.
didn't learn about
when
it
you-
until after that.
Yeah, exactly. So for those of you that don't know, what we're talking about is during your listing period, you can order a home warranty on the listing. It is free by most of our home warranty companies. And it works, I mean, like a normal home warranty. If during amendment to address concerns or during the listing period, something goes wrong with any of the appliances or the major components, then they just pay the service fee and they'll come out and fix it. Now, that doesn't include dry rot or anything like that, but it definitely can make a huge difference. And to your point, Teresa, I told my listing that I was putting this on a house. And then we found out the water line to the refrigerator didn't work. Well, we've got that home warranty, so no problem. I had forgotten to order it. So it came out of my pocket because I was doing the right thing. So the good news is they don't have to know that it costs you nothing. It's an added value that you bring, right? So it makes it special for you as a listing agent.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that too. Do most of you all do that? Put a home warranty on?
When I remember, yes, I do.
I do it every time.
Mhm.
And I played around with the different companies.
I've
I
had
haven't
brand
decided
new.
which one is
I
best.
had a little house in Smyrna. We listed it, and literally like 2 days later, they put in a brand new HVAC. on a listing agreement that costs them nothing.
Wow. Yeah, I need to do that more often. No, I mean, listen, that's why I love this business. You never stop learning. You're never bored. You're like, oh, I could do that. There's something to be said for that. And you're right, Teresa. It's like trying to find the one that's going to work for everybody, the home warranty, and it doesn't work like that, but you try to, at least if you use the same warranty company 75% of the time, hopefully if anything comes up and it's not covered, you can kind of call in that,
Oh yeah.
hey, help me out here a little.
So the question from George is
Another good thing.
it's a listing home warranty, and it is for the seller.
Seller coverage, it's called.
It's a seller's coverage, correct. They're not all created equal, so check around and make sure that the HVAC is covered, because in a lot of them it's not. It costs nothing. They don't have to know that, but it costs nothing, and it's a great protection for your seller. And it's through the listing period until it closes.
210 has a certain something that you can get your HVAC like certified. It's an extra step, but it's supposed to be amazing that way that if anything goes wrong with the HVAC, they're not coming back and going, oh, sorry. So there's something to be said for getting to know which companies offer better.
Cool.
Better nuance.
Wonderful.
Communication, knowing who to call, and organizing that amendment, I think are the biggest,
Do you automatically send the inspection report to the listing agent? And see, I'm just going to throw a caveat out there. I did that at the beginning.
With permission from the buyer.
Well, I only do it when the listing agent asks for it. And here's why. I got reamed by, literally this agent was not very nice, and he screamed bloody murder at me for sending the inspection report to him. Because he said, now if we can't work this out, everything that you just sent me, now have to disclose it.
Right. Well, I guess he shouldn't have opened it, huh?
Right.
That's
So
disagree.
Not everybody would
It's only things that are disclosable that have to be disclosed. You don't have to disclose this light switch isn't working or anything like that. It's only major things that are disclosable if they get the inspection report. You don't have to tell them.
Well,
the outside
I got shootouts. So I know that I always, when I send it over, say, I would be glad to send over the inspection report if you would like it. And that way it's up to them to decide whether they want it.
That's funny. Yeah. I blast that thing over there so quick because I always figure worst comes to worst, my little amendment will look like a day at the beach compared to that whole report.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, they don't have to open it, and I will make sure to say to the other side, I'm not opening this until I see your amendment to address concerns. Then I'm glad I have it because then I can reference. But again,
now sometimes I will always take pictures of what they're talking about and the verbiage, and I'll send that to them in an email so that they've got it directly from the inspection report without giving them the whole report. And there's sometimes, if it's a clean report, you don't necessarily want to send them the inspection report because it's so clean that they're going to go, well, this isn't bad at all. We shouldn't have to do anything, right?
I know. Even on a clean inspection report, the buyer still wants a few items and the sellers are scratching their heads. So,
exactly.
But again, if you have to say to somebody, that is not a big deal. That is my handyman for 2 hours. Happy housewarming. We're not going here. You have to bring it down to, because they don't know how much things cost.
Right.
And if you know you can get your handyman over there for a couple hours, and he can knock out 7/10 of this stuff.
Absolutely. So you need to get really good at understanding what things run. So don't miss out on our team meeting on August 11th. Shahab Fard will be on, and he's going to be talking to us about some of those repairs that would be important for your house and what those things cost. So you've got an idea, which will be great. Any other last questions before we jump off and let Liz get on with her day and everybody else?
Woohoo! You guys can always text me, hey, I need something. How much does this cost? Or who would I call? Or what,
Awesome. Liz, we appreciate your time. We know you're busy and everybody else is, so thank you so much. It was great session. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in. Hey,
All right.
thanks for the good stuff, Lisa, and all that. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, guys.